everybody, welcome back to the channel today. We've got an awesome video prepared for you. I really want to dig into the inner workings of the legislature. To do that, we have brought back our legislative director, Rick Travis. Rick, thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. But before we get into it today, I just wanted to remind you guys we are on the road to 10,000 subscribers. So please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. It really helps us with the algorithms to get this information out to as many people as possible. So take a moment, hit that subscribe button so that we can help that get out there. So Rick, I did want to, we did this video last week about, some of the bills that were coming out, and I just started thinking about it. Spot bills is something that we kind of leaned on heavily in that video. Spot bills are something that we're going to be talking about, I'm sure, through this entire legislature. So why not actually dig in here? I'm really looking to get a deep dive on what a spot bill is, the history kind of behind the practice, and how it's being used today.
That's a great series of questions, Kevin. To explain it, as I've been trying to do this season, because we do have multiple spot bills across the board, is I think most of us, regardless of what our age is, either saw it as a Saturday morning cartoon or inside of our own, high school, junior high, even some elementary schools have shown the famous cartoon, I'm Just a Bill, seen on Capitol Hill. And so that's kind of the idea of how we see the legislative process working. That's the way it was drafted in the Constitution at the federal level. However, people have played games with that process. And probably the majority of those games have been played in the California legislature. And one of those two vehicles I'll talk about this morning with you is a spot bill. So what is a spot bill? A spot bill is a piece of legislation that has what are called technical but not substantive changes. So an example of that would be, you could have a bill that says it's really great for people to use a crosswalk, as an example. And then somebody decides, hey, I want to have a bill that I can play with at any time in the legislature. So they write that, they put that in, and they go, we're going to change people to they. Okay, the first thing I want everybody to understand is changing the word people to they is probably not going to make an organization like ours or any other grassroots organization or lobbying group go, we got to mount up. We got to get everybody riled up to argue they, them, whatever it may be, because it doesn't change the law. It just doesn't. So by having a spot bill like that, you have a bill that's in that space. So for us, that'd be in the Second Amendment space or the hunting space, tools. And that bill will then progress through the different committees that it originally did when it became law. But meanwhile, as it's going through those committees, at any time, the author or authors can weaponize it. So what would that look like? Well, maybe you have a spot bill on a CCW, which there are like half a dozen of right now. Now we get a landmark decision because of the Bruin decision from the Supreme Court of the United States. We get something that comes out of the Rhodey or the Duncan cases that are in front of Judge Benitez right now. Maybe the Ninth Circuit in the three-judge panel says, yes, Benitez is right. And they kick it up. Before it goes to en banc, they can weaponize that spot bill and say, oh, well, they're hanging their hat on these 2 or 3 items. So we're going to write a bill that basically is a rewrite of that law that caused that lawsuit to try to correct that so they can kill the lawsuit.
Okay, so it sounds like what you're saying is, you create a bill within a specific category of the law. In this case, it's CCW. So we're going to take our CCW law and we are going to change the word people to they. And that's going to allow you later to completely introduce a new law within that bill or rewrite a part of an old law.
You can rewrite a part of an older law. So in other words, if all of a sudden you found out like using, so we can keep this all together. So we have the ammunition issues that we've had with the Rhodey case that we're saying are unconstitutional. So maybe they find that there were like, and I don't have that bill in front of me, but maybe there was like 7 planks in that bill, like a B, C, D, E, F. and they find out that, oh, the courts are going to hang their hat to overturn that on C and E and F. Well, now I can use this spot bill to address C, E, and F, make the corrections that came out in the court, and then keep the law intact. That's one avenue. Maybe there's something else that I just don't like, and I can do that. So we've already seen there's already been a couple of rewrites of bills already in this legislative season where they've added stuff to make something a criminal act or to push on different issues. And so spot bills are there for that. And the other thing spot bills are there for is, you know, we used to have, as you know, Kevin, a 2-year election cycle. So, you know, obviously 22 would be the, you know, non-presidential election, or what we call the midterms. And then you'd have 24, and they always go back and forth. And you always knew that the oddball year, like 23, was kind of dust yourself off from the midterms and start thinking about what's going to happen for the 24. Well, we went from no dust off straight to the 24s because we started having people declaring their candidacy for all sorts of different positions. So now those politicians who are legislators are looking for, hey, I need to maybe make a voice in these 2 or 3 areas, one of them being on gun control. And so gun control politicians have literally upped the number of bills that we're looking at, you know, to like we're well over 75. And why? Because of the number of spot bills they put in. And those spot bills are there so that now if there's a mass shooting, if there's anything in the news cycle they can take advantage of, they can go, oh, and by the way, Kevin, I am the one doing it because I have a, and they'll already have a bill number, they'll already have a bill in that place, and they can do that quicker and faster than the third alternative, which I'll talk about in a few minutes.
Right. So that's an expedited process that they are basically able to get a bill in, even though they don't exactly know which direction they want to go with it. I guess the last question that I have on spot bills would be, is that why that this process was originally intended for? How did this process come into Sacramento, and why is it being abused like this right now?
Well, it's been abused by both sides, to be politically fair. And why it was initially brought in was there's a very short period of time, the beginning part of January, to come up with what your bills are going to be. And a lot of times to collect all your staff, especially if you're a freshman coming in, you just simply don't have people in place. And so a lot of times freshman politician felt like I didn't even have a chance to represent the people that just elected me, which, you know, they are elected every 2 years. That could hamper them because then an opponent could say in an election where you were there for a year, Kevin, you didn't get a whole lot done. So spot bills became kind of a solution to that issue. But the problem is now they've been abused so much that the spot bill doesn't have a final deadline till late in the summer. So as a result, that spot bill goes through committees. No one testifies on it. Now it comes June, July, and in our space, somebody's looking at me or one of my predecessors going, why weren't you arguing against this? Well, because that bill didn't say that in January, February, March, April, May. It only says that now that it's June, but by the way, it's already cleared these 6 committees and I have one shot at it. And then it looks like it's the, you know, Chinese fire drill because it's all hands on deck for this one moment in time. And people are frustrated, but the fact was there was nothing to testify on.
That's actually interesting that you mentioned that. So you can have a bill that says one thing, and that bill can pass several committees, and then the verbiage on it can be changed, and it doesn't have to pass through those committees again with the new verbiage?
Nope.
So I know that we have processes in Sacramento that are in place to make sure and give people a voice. Are you essentially saying that this bypasses the opportunity to advocate against anti-2A bills?
It often does. And there's a lot of ways that happens because they have rules. They make up the rules all the time. They change the rules all the time up in the Capitol. A good example was everybody was upset prior to the pandemic because people had a limited voice. I mean, you know, it was people like myself as a lobbyist for our organization that could walk in and testify. You could sit out in the wings and watch, but you couldn't say anything. And then during the pandemic, obviously, none of us were allowed to meet in the building because of COVID and because of the shutdown, because of the rules the governor put in. So in order to have representation, they opened up phone lines that allowed for testimony. Well, now you had people from multiple organizations and multiple groups of people calling in to get their voice heard on all sorts of different topics there in the legislature. Some of the legislators didn't like it because that meant a 4-hour meeting, sometimes about 8 or 9 hours to hear everybody's input. So now what we've seen is now that the governor has declared the pandemic over, now we physically have to be there or you don't get to testify back in the hybrid of allowing both, which I thought was the most democratic process that we could have had in Sacramento, has been eliminated. So now tools that organizations like ourselves and others were using previously aren't being used because we can't. And that in turn limits the voice, especially when you look at that. Often they will run multiple bills within the same space of like the Second Amendment in 3 or 4 different rooms. They are often in 2 different buildings several blocks away. So it's impossible if you only have 1 or 2 people up there to have somebody in both rooms to testify. And in Sacramento, silence is admission. So if you're silent on something, you agree with it.
So they're literally creating a situation where you cannot voice yourself in every place at once, and then when you are silent on something, it's admission to what they're trying to pass. I'm just curious. This is actually extremely frustrating learning about this. What what is I mean, I understand this is an impossible question, right? But what is the fix to this? I mean, would the fix to something like this be your spot bill can only go through February or March? Like, why is, at what point, what's the threshold where it becomes egregious?
Well, I don't want to be negative, Nanny, and I don't want to be Pollyanna either. I mean, the fact is a lot of this stuff that people are noticing because they're starting to wake up and they're starting to realize that, oh, saying nothing, doing nothing, being a couch potato has equaled higher taxes, more crime. Like, there's a lot of factors in play that's caused a lot of people that I would have said sat on the fence for the past couple of years to get off the fence and go, what's going on? None of this happened overnight. And my message is none of it's going to change overnight. This is going to take, as you've been talking, Kevin, and doing so well on this channel, of getting people out there involved in politics at the local level. We've got to fight to take back and take away a supermajority, because until we do that, this is the world we have to operate in, and it's not a fun place to be, I can tell you. Drives and flights back home to Southern California where I can breathe a little fresh air are often really hard after you've been up there for a few days in the Capitol, because it's not easy to get through this. And what makes it harder is they still have a third option that we haven't talked about, and that's the infamous gut and amend.
Okay, so gut and amends are different than spot bills. And I was actually wondering this. So, I know that we've seen several gut and amends, but those, and correct me if I'm wrong here, do those differ from spot bills in the way where they can literally change language on a bill that is on a completely different topic? So you have a bill that's pertaining to, energy or energy companies or whatever. So they can just strip all the language or add language within those bills that would say take away, your Second Amendment rights.
Yeah. So gut and amends started out because there was a period of time, I want to say about 20 years ago, I could be off 5 years plus or minus, but a period of time where if there was a grammatical error or a syntax error, you had to bring the bill back the next year. You were done because of that error. So this is one of those areas why, you and I, outside of this, have sometimes talked, and I'm like, got to be careful, because sometimes there's unintended consequences with any good idea. This would be a great example. So the gut and amend process was put in place so you didn't have to bring back the bill. It has, over that time period, became that the only thing that can't be changed is the bill number. Everything else after the bill number, authors, topics, contents can be changed. And again, does not have to go back through the whole system, Kevin. So when they do these gut and amends, where they literally a year ago took an environmental bill that had nothing to do with anything and tried to turn it, when Levine tried to turn that into a gun violence tax bill that was on ammunition and firearm sales and stuff. And people are like, well, how did you not see that? Because we don't monitor Environmental Clean Water Act bills. That's not something we do, and that's what happens in it. Everybody has used it. I've seen the Republicans use it, the Democrats use it, because late in the season, you have a bill, if you're an author, that you realize probably is not going to get across the line, probably going to be held up in that final committee and not make it. And now there's a chance for you to become the hero by taking that bill, getting it, amending it, and making it into something else, and possibly getting across the line, getting it signed into law. And remember, at the end of the day, a lot of these politicians want to have those new laws so they can use that to campaign to get back in that job for another 2 to 4, 6 years, depending on what they're doing.
Well, I mean, why not do everything as a gut and amend then? Why have spot bills in the first place? If you can basically do whatever you want with these bills by gutting and amending them, why do spot bills?
I think has happened right now, and we're seeing happening. And this year is going to be a very big year to figure out how to deal with it all the way around. Is you have people like I'll just pick on him because I like picking on him. But Senator Portantino has an actual bill, which is a redo of 918 from a year ago, going against a Brune decision called Senate Bill 2. So straight out of the block, before, you got to realize you normally can't file a bill till January, but because the governor held a special session in December, he was able to get that bill out on the blocks in December. No language, just intent, and left it there. At that point, technically, it was a spot bill, didn't have language. But then once we rolled into January, he applied language, and he's changed that and amended it like a half a dozen times as he's gone through committees. So that was one tool in his chest. The second one is he has another CCW one that's just a spot bill. It makes no substantive, only a technical change of like, can we place them with their, that kind of stuff. Okay, why is that there? That's there so he can be nimble on his feet. And if anything happens in California between now and like August, he has a bill and a number that he can flip out to the press literally in minutes. And there's probably close to 45, 50 other bills within the Senate that are gut and amendable at this point. So gut and amends take a little bit longer. But what I'm trying to get at is, so let's just say he burns his spot bill. Well, that's his spot bill. He doesn't have another one in that space. But something else he gets a wild idea and wants to do, there are other bills that he can go negotiate and get with. So that's why they all exist, and that's kind of the time frame. But that's why you never get a straight answer out of me when you're like, so Rick, how many bills are we facing this year? Well, currently we're facing this, but it could be more, could be less, Kevin. And you're like, what? I thought we knew what they all were. Well, we know where the spot bills are, but the gun amends, none of those could come our way. They could go all for education, law enforcement, and forestry, or a chunk of them could come our way. We don't know.
Well, I can't exactly say that I envy your job up there, but I certainly appreciate the work that you're doing and the support that you're giving us and the reports that you're sending down so that we can all be aware of it. Rick, I really appreciate you coming on. Thanks again for spending time with us.
Yeah, thank you. And just a closing word to all the listeners out there. Realize this is not limited to just a Second Amendment space. This is across the board with your rights as a Californian and all the things that you want to do. This is being done to you from every angle, and consider that when it comes time to vote.
Well, thanks again, Rick. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Take care, guys.
Yeah, you too. And just so that you can know, Rick is fighting for you on an annual basis up in the Capitol, day in and day out. CRPA volunteers are advocating for us up in the Capitol, day in and day out. This is a fight that we are fighting on up until that bell rings for recess, and I can tell you for the lobbyists, even beyond that. So please stay tuned if you want to continue and see updates on the legislature here in California. Again, please, if you haven't already, be sure and subscribe, share, and like to this channel so that we can get it to as many people as possible. We're almost there on the road to 10,000 subscribers, so you can really help us out by doing that. Thank you again, guys, and we'll see you on the next one.